That's why we don't show ourselves in sunlight. People would know we're different. People would know we're different. This is what I am.
It's like diamonds. Beautiful.
Beautiful. The skin of the killer.
So when I was growing up, my grandfather would show me all these really scary monster movies about the creature from the Black Lagoon and the actual Frankenstein and Dracula who really was going to suck the blood out of his victims. So as the coming age starts showing more and more monsters that are lovable and have all these various humanistic traits and less traits of what was considered a stereotypical monster, I continue to wonder what is such a big appeal about a vampire that sparkles or a werewolf who is actually a teen heartthrob. As with any society that celebrates art, the art itself will change with the people. And because the monster's body is that of a cultural body, the change in society is partly to blame for the change in the monsters. So in the past, monsters were a lot different than what we view as today. The most recognizable monsters were, for example, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Count Dracula, and Frankenstein. What these types of monsters had in common is that most of society hated them, pretty much. They were very gross and gory, and they didn't have humanistic traits, and no one could see themselves getting along with them. A complete transition from what's in the future. The argument whether the monsters changed society or society changed the monsters could go in various directions, but the fact of the matter is that monsters are different today as they were in the past, and because of this, people view them differently and have different types of attractions. Formerly, the attraction was that it was gross and hideous and no one could imagine it as being humanistic, and so therefore it was viewed as taboo. Whereas today, so many monsters have so many human traits that people are attracted to them in an alternate way. There are various categorizations of these traits that cause subconscious attraction by us to different types of monsters. Take for example the vampire. Extremely huge in this day and time, especially with teen girls and women. Coincidence? I think not. The vampire in itself was written originally to be a representation of a phallic symbol. It was a sexual symbol, and this is kind of odd, but it does represent the fact that two humans sharing of bodily fluids, etc., etc. And it's not so much a coincidence that the vampire is always extremely attractive, and even in some stories, becoming a vampire makes you more beautiful and you have more sexual attraction. And we see this in things like Twilight, where Bella is more attracted to Edward when he sparkles, and this is his special power and such, or True Blood, where vampires are very sexually driven within their society. Or even the original Dracula, as all of his victims in every depiction were always women, and he always had an awkward sexual tension with these victims. There are others, for example the Beast, as we see in stories such as Beauty and the Beast or even The Hunchback of Notre Dame, more subtle examples as these are children's movies. These are typically monsters with grossly noticeable physical deformity and mutation. So they're a closer example back to the monsters of the past. However, instead of having these social flaws where they can't communicate with anyone, they're often sweet on the inside. And the people that they find themselves closest with are able to communicate with them, and not only this, but form deep relationships. Like, for example, the story of Beauty and the Beast, or as Esmeralda did with the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And as viewers, we watch these stories and we see that this beautiful person is allowed to fall in love, even though this is a grossly deformed creature, and we think that we could fall for them too. And this allows us to have a sense of compassion and therefore an attraction to this monster. There's also an example of the beauty. The beauty is typically depicted as a woman, but it can also be a male, though that's not as common. This person is always extremely evil or ugly on the inside and has an outermost beautiful. The first origination of the beauty type of monster was with muses in Greek culture. These were beautiful women, and then they had these ugly, dark sides and were even murderous at times. But in the modern day and age, we can see them with characters like Jessica Lange as a witch in American Horror Story Coven, where she's a beautiful woman and she uses her seduction to her advantage, but on the inside she's so much more evil. Ultimately, attraction and interest in these monsters is all relative to the individual. So it really depends on what you as an individual think. These are just some examples of the changing in society that's ultimately being shown through changes in monsters and the way that we as a culture feel about them, as the monster's body is a cultural body.